While the world watches the explosions in the Gaza Strip as if they were just another chapter in the violence in the Middle East, few realize that we are witnessing the exact fulfillment of prophecies written more than 2,500 years ago. What you are about to discover is neither conspiracy theory nor forced interpretation. This is the direct connection between Daniel chapter 9, Zechariah chapter 12, and the events unfolding now in Gaza, Jerusalem, and throughout the territory the Bible calls Judea. Benjamin Netanyahu, the United States, the European Union, and even South America are involved in this prophetic scenario that Daniel saw in visions. What happens in Gaza will not stay in Gaza, and the whole world is being prepared to accept something that Scripture had already warned against. The most ignored prophecy about this conflict is in the book of Zephaniah, chapter 2, verse 4. There, the prophet declares something terrifying about Gaza. He says that Gaza will be abandoned, that Ashkelon will be devastated, that Ashdod will be driven out at midday, and Ekron will be uprooted. These are not random names. They are the ancient Philistine cities that occupied exactly the territory we know today as the Gaza Strip. And verse 7 completes the thought by saying that that coastline will belong to the remnant of the house of Judah. In September 2025, Israel launched a massive ground operation in Gaza. For the first time since 2005, Israeli troops completely occupied areas that were under Hamas control. The world condemned it. The UN protested. But the Bible had already said that this would happen. The coastal territory would return to Judah. And what's most disturbing is that Zephaniah isn't talking about a temporary military operation. He's talking about permanent possession. When you connect that with Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, which speaks of a covenant confirmed for 7 years, you realize we're not just seeing conflict, we're seeing preparation. Preparation for the final peace agreement that the Bible calls a trap. In October 2025, Donald Trump announced a historic ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. 8 parties were involved. The United States led the plan. Egypt and Qatar acted as mediators. Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Jordan offered regional support. And even the European Union pledged reconstruction funds. Trump used specific words to describe the agreement. He said it would bring a strong, lasting and eternal peace. Eternal peace. These 2 words should make every Christian stop and open their Bible immediately, because in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3, Paul warns that when people say peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them. It is no coincidence that the most influential political leader in the West is using the very language that Scripture connects with deception in the last days. But the agreement is not just political. It is religious. It is based on the Abraham Accords, which Trump orchestrated in 2020. These accords created a framework for normalization between Israel and Arab nations, and more importantly, they laid the groundwork for the construction of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. Because Gaza is not just about territory. Gaza is blocking the prophetic path. As long as Gaza is in constant conflict, the world's focus remains on war. But when Gaza is resolved, the world will celebrate peace, and in that celebration, something far more dangerous will be unleashed. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 is the key. The prophet declares that he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. In prophetic language, 1 week means 7 years, and the Hebrew word for confirm is gabar, which doesn't mean to create something new, but to strengthen something that already exists. Trump isn't inventing peace in the Middle East out of thin air. He's confirming, strengthening, and officially empowering negotiations that have been underway for years. The Abraham Accords were the foundation. The ceasefire in Gaza is the next layer. And what comes after that is the final agreement with Israel that will allow the reconstruction of the temple. Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman has already signaled that Arab nations could allow the construction of the Third Temple in exchange for a comprehensive solution to the Palestinian question. Gaza is that solution. When Gaza is pacified, when the coastal territory is under Israeli control, as Zephaniah prophesied, the world will say that peace has finally arrived, and at that moment the path will be open. The path to the temple, the path for Jewish sacrifices to be restored, and the path for the Antichrist to enter and break everything in the middle of the 7 years, exactly as Daniel warned. The conflict in Gaza is not isolated. It is the prophetic prelude to the final trap. Zechariah chapter 12 verse 2 declares something that should make the whole world tremble. God says that he will make Jerusalem a cup of foolishness for all the surrounding peoples. The Hebrew word for staggering means to lose balance, to become confused. Jerusalem would not only be a place of conflict, it would be a place that would leave the nations staggering, not knowing what to do. And verse 3 goes on to say that all the nations of the earth will gather against her. This is not a regional threat, it is a description of global pressure. In 2025, exactly that happened. Israel was condemned by more than 120 countries at the UN General Assembly. Protests erupted in London, Paris, New York, São Paulo, and Madrid. Universities were occupied by demonstrators demanding sanctions against Israel. South American governments broke off diplomatic relations. The European Union debated funding cuts. And international organizations accused Israel of war crimes. A tiny nation has become the obsessive focus of the entire planet. Why? Because Jerusalem is not just a city, it is the spiritual epicenter of the cosmic battle. Satan knows what is written. He knows that Jerusalem is where Jesus will return, and he is mobilizing the entire world to resist it. The siege is forming exactly as the prophecy foretold. Before we continue, I feel that God has a special calling for you. I want to ask you to become an instrument to spread this message. Pause the video now, subscribe to the channel, and take the opportunity to leave your like. Each click of yours can cause other people to receive this same video on their devices at this very moment, taking this word to those who need it most. Don't wait. Do your part now. God may be counting on you to fulfill this purpose. Ezekiel chapter 38 describes a future coalition that will invade Israel, Gog and Magog, leading an alliance that includes Persia, which is modern-day Iran, Cush, which many identify as Sudan, Put, associated with Libya, and Togarma, linked to Turkey. This is not a random list. These are precisely the nations that today surround Israel with hostility. Iran supplies weapons and training to Hamas and Hezbollah. Turkey, under Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has dramatically increased its anti-Israel rhetoric. Sudan, despite temporary normalization, remains unstable. And Libya remains divided among factions, many aligned with anti-Western interests. What Ezekiel saw 2,600 years ago is now unfolding. But there is a crucial detail that many ignore. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 11 says that the invasion will happen when Israel is dwelling securely. The Hebrew word is betach, which means confidence, security, without fear. Israel is not secure now, but when the peace agreement is established, when Gaza is resolved, when the world celebrates that stability has finally arrived, then Israel will lower its guard. And at that moment of false security, the prophesied coalition will attack. The conflict in Gaza is creating the psychological conditions for Israel to accept an agreement that promises lasting security. But this security will be temporary, and what comes next will be catastrophic. Joel chapter 3 verse 2 is one of God's most direct warnings about the judgment of the nations. He says that he will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And there he will enter into judgment with them concerning my people and my inheritance Israel. whom they scattered among the nations and divided up my land. They divided up my land. That phrase is crucial. God doesn't say that the land of Israel belongs to the Palestinians, the Arabs, or the international community. He says it is my land, and any nation that participates in the division of that land will be judged. In 2025, multiple international proposals attempted to formalize a two-state solution. The European Union pressed for it. The United States, even under Trump, signaled a willingness to negotiate borders, and South America, led by Brazil and Argentina, supported resolutions calling for recognition of a Palestinian state. Each of these nations is positioning itself on the wrong side of the prophecy, not because supporting Palestinians is morally wrong, but because dividing the land God gave to Israel as an eternal covenant is directly confronting Scripture, and judgment will come. Joel is not being vague, he is being specific. The valley of Jehoshaphat is real. It lies between Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives, and it will be the place where God confronts the nations that have touched his inheritance. The conflict in Gaza is forcing the world to choose sides, and most are choosing the wrong side. Isaiah chapter 17 verse 1 makes a statement that has not yet been fully fulfilled. It says that Damascus will cease to be a city and become a heap of ruins. Damascus is the capital of Syria and is considered the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. For over 11,000 years, Damascus has survived. Empires have fallen, wars have devastated the region, but Damascus has remained until now. In July 2025, Israel launched direct airstrikes into the heart of Damascus. Missiles struck the Syrian Ministry of Defense and areas near the presidential palace. These were not peripheral attacks, they were central attacks. And for the first time in modern history, military analysts began to seriously discuss the possibility of Damascus being completely destroyed. Why does this matter? Because Isaiah is not describing damage. He is describing annihilation. Damascus will cease to be a city. This means total collapse. And when you connect Isaiah 17 with Ezekiel 38, you realize that the destruction of Damascus could be the trigger that sets off the invasion of Gog and Magog, because Syria is strategic territory between Israel and the northern nations. If Damascus falls, the path is open, and what started in Gaza could spread like wildfire throughout the entire region. The Middle East is not just in conflict, it is in prophetic collapse. Now that you understand how Gaza is connected to specific prophecies about the coastal territory of Judah, about deceptive peace agreements, about the global siege against Jerusalem, and about the impending destruction of Damascus, how about subscribing to this channel? Because what I'm sharing is not speculation. This is a direct connection between Scripture and verifiable events happening right now. If you want to continue receiving analyses that no one else is doing, connecting biblical prophecy with current geopolitics, click subscribe and turn on notifications, because what comes next is even more disturbing. Revelation chapter 6 verse 2 describes the first horseman of the apocalypse riding a white horse, holding a bow, but without arrows. He goes out there conquering and to conquer. But the victory is not military, it is political, it is diplomatic, it is through false peace. Many scholars identify this horseman as the Antichrist before revealing his true nature. He conquers without war, he conquers through agreements. And Trump, with his peace agreements in the Middle East, is inadvertently building the infrastructure that this horseman will use. I am not saying that Trump is the Antichrist. I'm saying that the system he's creating is exactly the kind of system the Bible describes. A system where peace doesn't come from God, but from human negotiation. And this peace will be the greatest illusion in history. Daniel chapter 12 verse 1 speaks of a time of anguish, such as has never been since there were nations. Jesus quoted this passage in Matthew chapter 24, verse 21, calling it the Great Tribulation, and he connected directly with Jerusalem. He said that when you see the abomination of desolation in the holy place, then those who are in Judea should flee to the mountains. Judea is the region that includes Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, and yes, Gaza. When the abomination of desolation is established, it will not be in the Vatican, it will not be in Washington, it will be in Jerusalem, in the temple. And that means the temple needs to be rebuilt first, and Gaza is in the way. While Gaza remains in conflict, the world's focus will remain on violence. But when Gaza is pacified, the next step will be the construction of the temple. And when the temple is built, sacrifices will be restarted. And when sacrifices are restarted, the prophetic clock will begin to tick. Daniel said that in the middle of the week, that is, 3.5 years after the agreement is confirmed, the leader will break the covenant and stop the sacrifices. He will enter the temple and proclaim himself God. This is the moment Jesus called the abomination of desolation, and from that point, the worst phase of human history will begin. Gaza is not just a territorial conflict. Gaza is the obstacle that needs to be removed for the prophetic clock to advance to the final phase. Revelation chapter 13 verse 7 says that the Antichrist has been given authority over every tribe, language, and nation. This is not just military control, it's systemic control. And verse 17 completes the thought by saying that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark of the beast. The technology that allows this level of control already exists. China leads the race in artificial general intelligence, a system that can make real-time decisions about who has access to what. The European Union is implementing mandatory digital identity. The United States is testing central bank digital currency. Even in South America, countries like Brazil and Argentina are discussing the integration of biometric systems with financial access. What the Bible described as impossible for centuries is now common infrastructure. But here's what few realize. The system doesn't need to be enforced. It just needs to be convenient. When you can pay with the palm of your hand, why carry a wallet? When you can be instantly identified, why carry documents? When you can access everything with a scan, why resist? Control doesn't come as dictatorship, it comes as efficiency, and Gaza is accelerating this acceptance because chaos breeds fear, and fear generates a demand for order, and order requires a system, and the system is already in place. It's just waiting for the right crisis to be accepted globally. Zechariah chapter 14 verse 12 describes what will happen to those who fight against Jerusalem. He says that their flesh will be consumed while they are still standing. Their eyes will be consumed in their sockets, and their tongues will be consumed in their mouths. This description sounds very much like the effects of nuclear weapons or directed energy. For centuries, this verse has seemed exaggerated. How could someone literally melt on their feet? But now, with weapons that exist in the arsenals of Israel, Russia, the United States, and China, we know exactly how this can happen. Israel possesses thermonuclear weapons, it possesses high-energy lasers, and it possesses defensive systems that can cause massive instantaneous damage. When the coalition of Ezekiel 38 invades Israel, thinking they will win easily, God will intervene. But he will not intervene only spiritually, he will use physical means. Ezekiel 38:22 says that he will judge with pestilence, blood, torrential rain, hailstones, fire, and brimstone. God will use the forces of nature and will also allow Israel to use its defenses, and the result will be total devastation for the attackers. But before this invasion happens, Gaza needs to be pacified, Israel needs to be safely inhabited, and the world needs to believe that peace has finally arrived. The conflict in Gaza is creating the psychological and political conditions for this false peace to be accepted. And when it is accepted, the trap will close. Luke chapter 21 verse 24 says that Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. For almost 2,000 years, Jerusalem has been under non-Jewish control. Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Crusaders, Mamluks, Ottomans, British. But in June of 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel captured East Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. For the first time since 70 AD, Jews controlled their holy city. But the control is not complete. The Temple Mount is still under Islamic administration through the Jordanian Waqf. And as long as this continues, the temple cannot be built. Gaza is pushing this issue because when Gaza is resolved, when the military pressure on southern Israel is eliminated, attention will turn to Jerusalem. And the inevitable question will be asked, if Israel can retake Gaza after decades of conflict, why can't it regain complete control of the Temple Mount? This question is not just political, it is prophetic. Because the temple cannot be rebuilt while the mosque is there. And the mosque cannot be removed without causing global war. But what seems impossible now may become inevitable after a peace agreement is reached. Because peace agreements often include clauses about holy sites. And if the Third Temple is part of the agreement, the world will accept it because it will seem to be the price of peace. But it will be the beginning of the final countdown. Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 speaks of the sixth bowl being poured out on the great river Euphrates and its water drying up to prepare the way for the kings of the east. The Euphrates River is drying up now. This is not a metaphor, it is verifiable physical reality. Satellite images show the river at historically low levels. And this is happening while China, Russia, Iran and Turkey strengthen military alliances. The kings of the East are not just China. It is all the Eastern powers that will move toward Israel, and the path is literally being prepared. But here's what connects it all. Gaza is in the far west of Israel. It's the closest point to Africa and Europe. When Gaza is under Israeli control, Israel will have complete strategic control, control of the Mediterranean to the south, control of the border with Egypt, and the ability to monitor every movement coming from the west. But the final attack will not come from the west. It will come from the north and the east. Ezekiel 38 describes armies descending from the north. Revelation 16 describes armies coming from the east. Israel will be surrounded, and Gaza will have been the initial pawn on the chessboard that positioned all the pieces for the final confrontation. What appears to be merely regional conflict is actually preparation for Armageddon. And the world isn't paying attention because it's focused on temporary political issues, completely ignoring the prophetic roadmap that is being followed precisely. Hosea chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 make a statement that has profound prophetic implications. It says that after 2 days he will revive us, and on the third day he will raise us up. In prophetic language, 1 day can represent 1,000 years, based on 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 8. If we apply this to Israel, 2 days would be 2,000 years. Jesus was crucified around the year 30 AD. 2,000 years later would be approximately now, and the third day would be the millennium, when Christ will reign. Israel was restored as a nation in 1948, close to the 2,000-year mark. Jerusalem was recaptured in 1967. And now, in 2025, Gaza is being retaken, completing the territorial control predicted in the prophecies. Are we seeing the literal fulfillment of Hosea? Is the prophetic clock ticking the final seconds before the third day begins? Gaza is not an accident, it's chronology. This marks the closing of a cycle that began with the Roman expulsion, continued with the worldwide exile of the Jews, and is now ending with the complete restoration of all the land that God promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Every inch of territory that Israel recovers is not just a military victory, it is prophetic fulfillment. And when the last piece of prophesied land is under Israeli control, the final clock will begin ticking towards the return of Christ. Gaza is the prelude. What comes after will change everything. Matthew chapter 24 verse 6 records Jesus saying that we will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but that the end is not yet. Many use this verse to argue that there have always been wars, so nothing has changed. But Jesus was not saying that wars don't matter. He was saying that wars alone do not indicate the end. But when you combine wars with all the other signs he mentioned, earthquakes, famines, plagues, persecution of Christians, spiritual deception, love growing cold, the gospel being preached to all nations, then you know the generation is near. In 2025, all these signs converged simultaneously: Gaza burning, Ukraine at war, extreme tensions in the South China Sea, earthquakes on an increasing scale, new diseases resistant to treatment, Christian persecution at record levels globally, apostasy within churches, and technology allowing the gospel to reach literally every nation through the internet. This is not an isolated sign, it is total convergence. And Gaza is at the epicenter of this convergence because Gaza forces the world to take a stand on Israel. And taking a stand on Israel is taking a stand on God. There is no neutrality. Either you believe that God gave that land to Israel as an eternal covenant, or you believe that Israel is an illegitimate occupier. And your position determines which side you are on in the cosmic battle that is unfolding now. Gaza is not just politics. Gaza is a global spiritual test. The conflict in Gaza is not random. It is not merely the result of decades of political tension or territorial disputes. It is a literal prophetic fulfillment of what Zephaniah, Daniel, Zechariah, Ezekiel, Joel, Isaiah, Jesus, and John saw and warned about millennia ago. Gaza is the coastal territory that will return to Judah. Gaza is the obstacle being removed to allow for deceptive peace agreements. Gaza is the crisis conditioning the world to accept centralized control. Gaza is the prelude to the rebuilding of the temple. And Gaza is the stage where the world is revealing which side it is really on. If you've watched this far, it wasn't by accident. God is calling your attention. He's showing you that time is running out. Jesus is coming back. And the question isn't whether you believe in prophecy. The question is whether you're ready. Because when the last piece of the prophetic puzzle falls into place, when the peace agreement is signed, when the temple is built, there will be no more time for decision. Subscribe to this channel, share this video, and most importantly, surrender your life to Christ while there is still time. Because Gaza is the warning, and judgment is coming.